A lot of Americans dream about moving to Mexico, and after living here, I completely understand why. The weather, the food, the slower lifestyle, the lower cost of living, the culture. But I also think that there are a few mistakes that foreigners can make that can genuinely create problems for themselves after moving here. And before anybody gets offended, no, I'm not pretending I have Mexico figured out, guys. Not even close. Half of the time, I'm still trying to figure out how I accidentally ended up in the wrong driving lane while I'm here. I'm still learning as well. But the longer that I live in Mexico, the more I notice that certain patterns seem to cause problems for foreigners over and over again, and the biggest mistakes usually are not what people expect. It's rarely cartels or dramatic movie stuff. It's usually mindset problems. Therefore, here are 5 mistakes that I think can make life way harder for expats in Mexico, or should I say immigrants. And actually, that's the first thing. Calling yourself an expat instead of an immigrant, this topic gets a little emotional fast online because technically a lot of Americans moving to Mexico are immigrants. But Americans often use the word expat instead. And once I started looking into this, I realized that people have very strong opinions about it. Some people think the word expat sounds more privileged, like wealthy immigrants using a different label to separate themselves from the other immigrants. But other people say that expat family is simply meaning somebody living abroad temporarily. Therefore, the whole thing becomes this giant identity debate online. And honestly, I didn't even think that deeply about the word before I moved here. But once you live outside of your own country, you start realizing language carries a lot of emotional weight, and especially around identity. And honestly, I think that humility matters more than anything here because no matter what the label is that somebody's using, at the end of the day, you are still a foreigner learning how to exist in somebody else's country. And I think that remembering that mindset is going to help people a lot. But then there's another mistake that creates a problem fast here: refusing to learn Spanish. And this one can honestly be the most common sense problem. You should be surprised about how many foreigners move to Mexico expecting everybody around them to adapt to English forever. Honestly, it happens. Most Mexicans I've met are incredibly patient and kind about the language differences. But I also think that learning Spanish shows respect, even bad Spanish. Trust me, guys, my Spanish still has moments where it sounds like a confused toddler trying to order tacos, but people usually appreciate the effort. And therefore, I think that foreigners who refuse to try to learn Spanish accidentally isolate themselves from the country that they moved to be a part of. And that sounds miserable long term because Mexico feels way different once you actually communicate with the people more naturally. But then there's another mistake that I constantly see online, and that's treating Mexico like a cheap vacation instead of a real country. And this one gets uncomfortable sometimes because there are foreigners that move here talking about Mexico like it's just some life hack: cheap rent, cheap food, cheap labor, cheap everything. But people actually live here. Families live here. Communities exist here. Local people deal with these rising prices here as well. And therefore, I think that foreigners get themselves into trouble when they forget that Mexico is not just a cheaper version of America, it's its own country, own culture, with its own history. And honestly, I think people who respect that usually have a much better experience living here. But there is one mistake that I didn't fully understand until I moved here myself: bringing American political drama with you. This is one of the real things because a lot of Americans moving abroad are emotionally exhausted. Politics, culture wars, racism, anger, stress, division, constant outrage online. And sometimes people move to Mexico expecting to completely escape from all of that overnight. But then they accidentally bring that same energy with them. And constant political arguments, constant negativity, constant comparisons. And honestly, I think that moving to different countries can help change your environment, but it doesn't automatically heal your brain. And this is something that I had to think about myself because sometimes Americans move abroadly physically while mentally still living in the American internet culture 24/7. And therefore, I think that one of the most healthiest things foreigners can do while they're in Mexico is actually slow down mentally, learn the culture, meet the people, build a real life outside of the internet. And honestly, That probably applies everywhere. But then there is one final mistake that I think causes disappointment for most people. Thinking moving to Mexico will magically fix your life. And this one is very important because social media sometimes romanticizes moving away way too much. Like the second that you land in Mexico, all of your problems are going to instantly disappear. You become beautiful, peaceful, happy, stress free, eating tacos under a palm tree while listening to music playing in the background. Meanwhile, reality is, it's still reality. You still bring yourself with you. You still bring your habits, your stress, your relationships, your personality, your mental health. Therefore, I think that Mexico can absolutely improve people's quality of life in many ways. But it is not magic. And honestly, I think that people who move here with a realistic expectation, they usually end up much happier long term. Because then you can appreciate Mexico for what it actually is, not some fantasy version that you invented online. And honestly, that's something I'm still learning myself while I'm living here. The longer that I stay in Mexico, the more I realize I know way less than I thought I did. And weirdly, I still think that's healthy because the second that somebody moves to another country and thinks that they fully understand it, that's probably when they stop learning. And I think that living abroad should probably do the opposite. It should make you more curious, more humble, more observant, not more arrogant. So I'm curious as always, guys. If you live in Mexico, what mistake do you think that foreigners make all the time? And if you're an expat or an immigrant, what's something that you had to learn after moving here? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you enjoy conversations where we try to understand the real differences between life in Mexico and the United States together, well, then make sure you subscribe because I'm definitely not an expert in any of this, guys. I'm just a guy from the US living in Mexico trying to understand things a little bit better alongside of everyone else.